Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sabrina Johnson, a member of the Equal Opportunity and Diversity Management Division. Thank you for joining us today as we present training on the awareness of incivility. Today's presenter is the Director of EODMD, Mr. Richard Pete Hill, who takes tremendous pride in providing each employee with the skills and tools needed to perform at your best. Pete's goal today is to bring awareness to workplace incivility by providing insight into the major players, the role that one's personality plays, and what you can do to help mitigate incivility in your workplace. At the midpoint of today's training, we will stop and ask for your questions and comments, as your engagement is highly encouraged and will add value to this webinar. Also, at the conclusion of today's webinar, we would like for you to participate in a short survey that will be available to you electronically when this session ends. You will also receive your certificate of completion for your records. This webinar will begin in 2 minutes, as the next voice you hear will be that of Pete Hill. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Richard Pete Hill, the Director of Equal Opportunity and Diversity Management. According to my clock, it is about 2:32, so hopefully all of our colleagues have had time to join us. As you can see from the slide, today's webinar is entitled Workplace Incivility. It's about disrespect and a lack of accountability. Before we get started, let me make a few points based on the research of Dr. Sandy Hershkovitz, a professor at the University of Calgary in Canada. According to Hershkovitz, most research on the workplace or in the workplace in terms of civility shows that incivility leads to health problems such as anxiety. Now, most of you probably already knew that, but here's something you may or may not have known. Incivility also contributes to negative work attitudes like less commitment, higher intentions to quit, and poor work performance. According to Hershkovitz, you and I, as humans, love to feel included. And the arch enemy of inclusion in terms of the workspace is, in fact, incivility. Because it turns out that we as humans, we have an intense desire to belong. And so for the course of the next several minutes, I'm going to talk to you about the following. At the conclusion of today's lesson, you'll be able to define workplace incivility. You'll be able to describe the 3 incivility players. You'll be able to discuss the impact of power and personality with respect to incivility. And last but not least, I'm going to talk to you today about the role that leadership must play in terms of preventing incivility. Incivility is all around us. When we go to the movies, we see movies about people acting uncivilly in the workplace. Just getting online today, you're going to be bombarded with rude and discourteous behavior. Even simply watching the evening news, you cannot escape incivility. So did you know that rude and disrespectful behaviors are pervasive in all types of organizations? In fact, the situation is getting worse. Back in 1998, Harvard University commissioned a study led by Dr. Christine Peraft, and she surveyed over 800 employees across a wide array of industry. And here's what she found. When all of the surveys was gathered and reviewed, they discovered that 49% of those individuals responding, 49%, said that they had experienced incivility, get this, ladies and gentlemen, at least once a week. Incivility in America then is rising, and it's rising to a crisis level. They interviewed millennials, Generation Xers, baby boomers, and even the silent generation. It is difficult, if not impossible, to get all four generations to agree on something. But in this instance, they all agree with 60+% that incivility in these United States has risen to crisis level. Why is that important to you and I? Well, last I checked, we work in the United States of America, which means we are a part of this 66+%. Not only did they record this by generations, ladies and gentlemen, but I mentioned to you about 2 slides ago that Dr. Christine Parath did this original survey in 1998. She redid the survey in 2011 and noticed there was an increase in the responders saying that they had experienced incivility at least once a week. It upticked to 55%. But just last year, she reconducted the survey again. We are now at 62% of American workers experiencing incivility at least once a week. I'm going to highly recommend at this time that you guys, when you get a chance, to go online and look up this book entitled The Cost of Bad Behavior. It is written by Dr. Christine Parath and her colleague, Dr. Christine Pearson. These 2 individuals are the foremost thought leaders in terms of incivility. They are the gold standard. So what they say matters. When you get an opportunity, please check out their book, The Cost of Bad Behavior. It is indeed an eye-opener. When I talk about workplace civility, I often get the feeling that nobody understands what I'm talking about when I talk about acting civilized in the workplace. However, when I talk about workplace incivility, I get direct feedback that everyone has experienced it. Which brings me to the word incivility. For your awareness, the word incivility is derived from the Latin word incivilis, simply meaning not of a citizen. Why is that important? Can you imagine if you was in Roman times, in ancient Rome? If you were not a Roman citizen, that means that you could be subjected to barbaric behavior at any moment because you had no rights as a citizen of Rome. Hence, we derived the word incivilis. Now, imagine some 2,000 years later, and you're working at NWS and some obscure WFO, and you're not of a citizen, meaning your colleagues are not allowing you to participate in all of their reindeer games. You are an outsider. You're not being included. This is what makes incivility so insidious. Incivilis, meaning not of a citizen. So what then is workplace incivility, now that we know where the word came from? Dr. Christine Parath and her colleague, Dr. Christine Pearson, came up with this definition. Remember, they are the thought leaders in incivility research. They deemed it as low intensity, deviant behavior that violates workplace norms for mutual respect, and it may or may not be intended to harm the target. Before I go any further, this needs a little unpacking. Low intensity, something as simple as not speaking to somebody in the morning or speaking to everyone except that one person. Low intensity. But it is deviant behavior because it is deviating from what is considered our workplace norms. It is not very respectful because you did not speak in the instance or the example I gave not speaking. You did not mutually respect your colleagues. Now, here's the thing about incivility. It may or may not be intended to harm the target. Just because I didn't speak to you, that doesn't mean that I intentionally was acting uncivil. Maybe I didn't see you. Maybe I was preoccupied at the moment. Personality will come into play later on in this lecture, but I want you to keep that in mind. Here's what happens when workplace incivility is occurring. It causes a decrease in work effort, productivity, motivation, creativity, even helping behaviors such as assisting your coworkers. OCB, by the way, stands for Organizational Citizenship Behavior. How are you conducting yourself in the workplace? Workplace incivility, low intensity, deviant behavior that violates workplace norms for mutual respect. And please remember, it may or may not be intended to harm the target. This slide is talking about workplace bullying, and I put it here for a reason. When I talk to people about incivility, I notice they like to conflate incivility with bullying. Ladies and gentlemen, I assure you they are not the same thing. The definition according to the Workplace Bullying Institute, yes, they actually have an institute for bullying, is repeated health-harming mistreatment of one or more persons by one or more perpetrators in the form of verbal abuse, offensive conduct, or behavior, and work interference. I will remind you of the definition of incivility: low intensity, deviant behavior. When you look at the definition of bullying, number one, is not low intensity, and it clearly has an intent to hurt someone. So those are the distinctions. One is low intensity, deviant behavior with an ambiguous intent. You're not quite sure when it comes to incivility. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, they say. But with bullying, you and the bully know absolutely what they are doing and why. So please, as of today, do not conflate incivility with workplace bullying. They are not, I say again, are not the same thing. Take this for example. For any of you like me who has diabetes and you are told by your dietitian that you have pre-diabetes, but as my doctor explained to me, once you're on the line of continuum, it can only get progressively worse from here if you take no actions. Likewise, ladies and gentlemen, once you get on this continuum of incivility, starting with, in the far left corner, simple, distracting, annoying, and irritating behaviors, remember this is low risk, low intensity. It is disruptive, but not cataclysmic. It may consist of eye rolling, maybe a sarcastic comment or two, but it's nothing you can't deal with. But as it continues and progresses, it gets worse. Now we've gone from low risk to high risk, from disruptive to threatening behaviors. Now we're taunting people. We are intimidating, and ultimately it can end up in physical violence because bullying is aggressive and potentially violent behavior. For those of you who was reading along with me, you notice I skipped racial and ethnic slurs because that brings me to yet another distinction. Incivility is not the same as bullying, and bullying is not the same as discrimination. Discrimination is based on a protected class. If you've taken a moment and looked in the hallways, if you are at headquarters, you would notice some EEO posters that clearly define the differences between the three. Likewise here, please know that when you get on the line of continuum, To the left is incivility. To the extreme right is really discrimination. In between the two is bullying behavior. Caution and warning note. Sadly for all of us, incivility and bullying are not considered illegal. You have no legal protections from workplace incivility or bullying. However, that doesn't mean that you have no assistance at all. I will talk about that a little later. These are the three key players when we talk about workplace incivility. They each have a name. The instigator, the target, and the observer. The observer can also be referred to as the witness. The instigator, the target, and the observer. Being a diversity management director, I feel compelled to point something out. Notice the woman figure there has the word target next to her. When I describe what the target is, you will understand why. We did not arbitrarily place the word target next to woman as if to say she's weak or something. But there are rules to incivility, and when I describe them, you will understand why target is next to the female character. So what is the instigator? This person, first of all, can be a man or a woman, but the instigator of incivility is generally somebody in a position of power over somebody else, either in the organization level or socially or just through plain old influence. It is somebody who behaves uncivilly in order to either assert or preserve his or her power. Instances may occur where the instigator inadvertently damages the target by some innocuous behavior and is unaware of the effect of their outcome. That's important to know, by the way, as fancy as it may have sounded. Remember, incivility is about low intensity. When they say instances may occur, that is really an act of bullying. So you've stumbled from incivility, low intensity, into bullying, a little higher intensity. Last but not least, the instigator, man or woman, have the ability to masquerade their acts of incivility as innocent or socially inept transgressions. Wow, what does that mean? What that means, ladies and gentlemen, is let's take you have somebody who likes to joke a lot. They're really acting incivilly or uncivilly toward you. But because they pose it as a joke, they masquerade it under the cover of laughing. Your feelings are still hurt. You still feel slighted, but this person, because everybody thinks he or she is the cool person, they get away with it. Because, hey, after all, he was just kidding, or she was just kidding. That's not what you perceived, however. But the instigator may have the ability to masquerade his or her act of incivility as an innocent or socially inept transgression. And that brings us to the target. The target is an employee who is subjected to workplace incivility. So when you are subjected to workplace incivility, we now refer to you as the target of that instigator. Now, here's some things we need to know. Targets are not just merely thin-skinned people who are complaining about everything. That's what we tend to believe. Targets, again, are not merely thin-skinned employees who are easily offended or perceive a personal slight in every interaction. How many of you know somebody in your workplace that is always offended about every little thing? In fact, they are so sensitive, you even act differently when you are in their presence. We're going to talk about personalities later. It's very important to know that personality plays a major role in terms of what is and what is not incivility in the workplace. So among targets of workplace incivility, their views of organizational injustice will differ depending upon both their organizational status. Who are they in the organization? Are they the supervisor, co-worker? And the status of the instigator. Is the instigator your boss? Is it your coworker? That's going to bring us to the conversation about power. Power and personalities matter in terms of workplace incivility. In fact, it says it here. The big 5 personality traits play a huge role in how incivility is perceived by the target. And that brings us to this person. Who is the observer? Please be mindful that the instigator, the target, and yes, even the observer can be a man or a woman, can be a supervisor or the supervised. Workplace incivility spillover occurs when people observe negative behavior or deviant behavior, when the instigator is attacking the target, in other words. Usually what happens when you observe incivility, you are surprised and perhaps angered. Those are the 2 most common responses. But here's what I want you to know. It doesn't say it right here, but from the research I've conducted and personally read, both the target and the observer will seek revenge when they are the victims or the witnesses of incivility, more often than not. The observer may be deeply impacted by witnessing mistreatment of the target due to their own feeling of powerlessness. Hey, that's the supervisor. What can I say about this? My performance appraisal is coming up. But I really like my coworker, but I like my career more. These are the types of things that may be going through your head. Observers can experience a deep sense of shame then for not being able, and they should have said willing, to intercede or prevent the incident. Imagine being placed in that awkward position. You're just walking down the hallway and you happen to witness somebody being treated uncivilly by their supervisor or coworker. What do? Here's what you should know about the target. Targets are usually not in a power position. But here's another caution and warning statement. Power is not a position on an organizational chart. Power comes in 2 varieties, formal and informal. Formal power is like your supervisor, your leaders, your managers. Informal powers are people in key positions like, say, the administrative assistant, the IT guru, the financial whiz. They may not have any official power, but if you upset them, they can make your day very, very horrible. Here's what you should know about the target. They may be seen as a threat to the instigator for one reason or another. Maybe you know more than the supervisor and he or she doesn't appreciate it. Maybe your colleagues think you're too confident in what you know. Here's one I've heard quite often since I've been in the weather service. You may become the target of uncivil behavior simply because you have more or less education than the instigator. That is a reason for being targeted. Here's what I was telling you earlier, ladies and gentlemen. The target is more likely to be a female because remember, this is about power. And in American society, as much as we don't want to admit it, men currently are still in the power positions, particularly at work, because we normally associate power at work with being in charge of something. And 9 times out of 10, particularly in the weather service, if you see someone in charge, it is more likely a male. Hence, the target is more likely to be a female because she will be in the powerless position, figuratively speaking. Usually, the target will not report incivility out of fear, and that is a shame because when you don't report incivility, the instigator will continue to act uncivilly. And I will remind you, this is on a line of continuation. They may start off acting uncivil and end up being discriminators. Ultimately, the target can become a victim of discrimination. Here's the other things I want you to know. Your position of authority doesn't protect you from incivility. Gender matters. If you are a male supervisor, you are less likely to experience uncivil behavior from your team. Being a female supervisor, on the other hand, you don't enjoy that same luxury. Your team members, particularly the ones who are male, may feel bold enough to challenge you because they see a woman and not a supervisor. Male targets, this is very important, male targets of incivility are more likely to retaliate. Think about your evening news when you see the yellow tape around the workspace because somebody has came to work and killed someone. Maybe they started off with incivility, the supervisor mistreating this person who was a male, and they kept doing it. And remember, most people don't report incivility, so you're allowing this to build up. Women and men do not handle stress in the same way. This is well documented. Most men, because of the way we are socialized, we have a tendency to internalize things. Excuse me. And when that happens, we allow internal stress to build. So we are more likely as men, if we are the targets of incivility, to retaliate violently. When the target feels powerless, they will also sabotage the instigator. Let me give you some examples. You are the big bad male supervisor, yelling at what you perceive to be your weak female administrative assistant for whatever reason. And because she didn't say anything to you out of fear for her job or her physical safety, you assumed you'd gotten away with it. But what you didn't realize was as soon as you got out of her eyesight, she called up her best friend who works in finance. And you didn't receive a paycheck for the next 90 days and you have no reason or no idea why. That is the beauty of being the target. When they retaliate, the instigator never see it coming. So would-be instigators within the sound of my voice, please know, observers and targets will retaliate almost 100% of the time in some way, form, or fashion. Targets are at greater risk of stress-related health issues. Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot stress this enough. Because incivility is low intensity, we have a tendency as employees to try to ignore it. But it's like putting a feather on something. It may be a light feather, but do you know a bag of feathers can weigh a ton? Each individual feather was light, but collectively they were heavy. Likewise with stress. Each individual uncivil act you could handle, but it was the accumulation of it that finally made you not be able to handle what it was you were trying to handle. And so therefore, your health becomes a problem. High rates of absenteeism and diminished work productivity. If you are a supervisor or a manager listening to me right now, here's why you should care about workplace incivility. Your performance appraisal is at risk because when productivity is diminished, they're going to hold you accountable. When all you had to do was be aware of what was happening in your workspace. So high rates of absenteeism means there's nobody at work doing work, which means we have diminished work productivity. Last but not least, I want to point out that personality matters. I'm going to go through one more thing and then I'm going to open it up for questions. I'm going to talk to you about the observer and then we will open it up for questions. So please, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask. Well, let me correct myself. I said after I talk about the observer, but actually I need to talk about the instigator real quick. Instigators, real quick, are in power positions. These are usually your managers and supervisors, or it could be somebody who is considered a subject matter expertise. They have no particular GS grade. It could be a GS 9 or 11. They're not really in charge, but they have institutional knowledge and everybody respects them, from the MIC to the intern. This is the go-to person. So by that virtue, they are in a power position. These people then are deemed irreplaceable, which makes them ultimately to be seen as above the law by the targets. And if they're not in a leadership position, guess what? Leadership will protect them. Instigators are more likely to be a male for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Based on our society, men normally occupy the power positions. Ladies, I realize you don't want to hear that, but until our society changes radically, this is still the norm. Instigators are more likely to be in a leadership role than not. Again, if you're not an actual leader and you are an instigator, more than likely you're being protected by manager, which is why you can get away with it, because you have been deemed irreplaceable. Here's what instigators do. These individuals like to hold up your project. They would tend to publicly humiliate you. They fail to display common courtesies like a simple good morning. They will refuse to acknowledge your expertise. They ask everybody a question at the meeting but you. They refuse to give targets credit for performance. You worked late, came in early, and your supervisors got credit for the project and he never mentioned your name. That is an act of incivility. Last but not least, because of the line of continuation, the instigator may ultimately be guilty of discrimination if they continue to go down that road. One slide away from the questions, ladies and gentlemen, bear with me. Observers or witnesses. Observers or witnesses. Anybody can be an observer of incivility in the workplace. However, males, once again, that power thing, males are more likely to assist female targets with this caveat. Ladies, if the male in question who observed the incivility deemed it as not that serious, like nobody spoke to you, they're not going to help you. That's what this means. They are more likely to assist depending on the severity. Observers may retaliate against the instigator based on the severity of the incident or their relationship to the target. What if that's my girlfriend in the workplace or my boyfriend? Yeah, I saw you doing what you were doing. I'm going to get you back. Believe me. Observers may or may not agree with the target's perception of the incident. Personality matters. Here's what I mean. Remember what I said earlier? Low intensity. So just because somebody didn't speak to you or they didn't invite you out to lunch, if somebody observes that, that doesn't mean they're going to jump on your side. They may actually say to you, really? It's not that serious. Here's the other thing. Observers normally have an immediate negative reaction to whatever incivility they witness. When females are the observer of other females being targeted, guess what happens, ladies? According to research, you will see it as normal. Here's what I mean. At the NWS, women are very rare. You may be the only woman in your WFO or HFO or regional or field headquarters. When another one shows up, as in another female, and she goes through the exact same harassment that you went through and survived, then you're not going to have any sympathy for her because your rationale is, hey, I survived it, so can you. So females observing other females being targeted, according to researchers, have a tendency, that doesn't mean everyone, ladies, will see it as normal. Observers may engage in what they call a tit-for-tat spiral. Let me tell you what that means. You didn't answer my email, or I saw you harassing my coworker, and you send me an email later and I ignore you. But since I ignored you, now you ignore me. We're doing this tit for tat thing. I observe you not speaking to my coworker. So now I don't speak to you. You didn't realize I didn't speak to you, so now we're not speaking to each other. Tit for tat spiral. Observing repeated incivility ultimately will take a toll on the observer's emotions. Observers may decide to leave a job out of a sense of helplessness. We all need to be aware of that. Just witnessing incivility on a regular basis can cause people, highly trained meteorologists, hydrologists, and IT personnel, etc., after all that money we spent, we end up losing them because we created a hostile working environment. At this time, Sabrina, could you please open up the text box for questions?
Thank you, Pete. We do have a few questions so far. The first question is, to whom should incivil behavior be reported to when instigator could be up your chain?
Good question. First thing you want to do is you want to resolve all problems at the lowest level. But as you indicated, your supervisor may be the instigator. Then you need to go to that person's supervisor if you feel comfortable in doing that. If nothing else, you should talk to a coworker, make them aware of what's going on in case you may need a witness later on. And that was an excellent question because, as I pointed out earlier, ladies and gentlemen, uncivil behavior and bullying is not illegal. So you can go to NOAA Civil Rights, but there's not going to be much they can do for you. So sadly, I don't have a 100% answer to give you, because if it is your supervisor, the only thing you can really do is go to that person's supervisor. Are there any other questions, Sabrina?
Yes. The next question. What are the NWS norms regarding civil and incivil behavior that come into play on this subject?
That is an excellent question. And my answer is thus: it depends. Leadership matters. And I'm going to talk about this later on in the presentation, ladies and gentlemen. Anytime there is no law to protect an employee in the workplace, then your only refuge is leadership. The only thing you can hide behind is leadership, because the law can't protect you. So to answer that question, it depends. One WFO may have a professional staff of leaders. So they have created an environment that is civil. Down the road is another WFO where it's the wild, wild west. It all rises and falls, ladies and gentlemen, on leadership. Here's why I can say that with absolute certainty. One of the 11 universal principles of leadership says, know your team and look out for their welfare. How on earth, if you're doing that one principle, and there's 10 more, by the way, if you just did that one, incivility would not have a fighting chance. Know your team and look out for their welfare. Are there any other questions, Sabrina?
Not at this time. So please continue, Pete. Thank you.
All right. Again, ladies and gentlemen, please ask any questions that you would like. I will answer them to the best of my ability. What do these people have in common? Steve Jobs, Michael Jordan, Jennifer Lopez, and my favorite guy, General George Patton. They all are instigators of harassment, of some type of incivility in the workplace. Let's start with Steve Jobs, a certified genius. You want to invent something that's going to change the world? Accept no substitute. But if you're trying to manage a workplace, do not allow this guy anywhere near it. He was known to curse people out, belittle you in staff meetings. He was the walking epitome of uncivil behavior in a workplace. But man, he could invent some good devices. Michael Jordan, 6-time NBA champion, punched his own teammate in the face. Instigator. Jennifer Lopez, musical genius, excellent dancer, and by some accounts, a movie star. refuses to speak to her fellow cast members, so much so that they put it in the newspapers. And my hero, George S. Patton, relieved of command during World War II as an instigator. Why? Because he was mistreating wounded veterans in hospitals. He did not want to believe that PTSD existed back then. They called it battle fatigue. So he actually slapped a soldier, which on the line of continuum went from being uncivil when he was just yelling at the young lad to bullying when he snatched him up, and then violence when he slapped him, the line of continuum. Needless to say, he was relieved of duty. But that is what all of these people who have dissimilar fields, but they are similar in one respect. They all acted uncivilly at work. And if you remember what I said about the instigator, they are usually protected by leadership. When Michael Jordan punched his teammate, didn't even make the evening news. When General Patton slapped that soldier, he was only relieved for a short while. And then they needed him in combat and he was back on duty. Steve Jobs, until the day he died, was still producing outstanding products. And last I checked, they're still putting Jennifer Lopez in music videos as well as movies. Leadership will protect the instigator. Well, we already had our question and answer session. Unless there are some questions pending right now, Sabrina, I'm going to keep it moving. I assume that means there are no questions. I will keep going. Civility, ladies and gentlemen.
You have a question. We do have one
By all
question.
means. You said we do have one question, Sabrina.
Yeah.
What is the question?
What is a good way to approach an instigator that doesn't acknowledge that they're the problem? For example, if you approach them and they flat out say that there isn't an issue, how would you approach this?
Good question. First of all, let's go back to the definition. Workplace incivility has been defined as low-intensity deviant behavior with an ambiguous intent to harm. Ambiguous is the key here, ladies and gentlemen. It is possible for a person to not believe that they were acting uncivilly to you. If I grew up in a culture where speaking to one another, for example, was not the norm, that's how I'm going to come to work. So I'm not speaking to anybody. You came from a culture where everybody spoke. Now our cultures are colliding. In my mind, I didn't do anything wrong when I looked right at you in the hallway and kept walking. But in your mind, from where you're from, you was like, how dare he? So we now have an obligation, using my scenario right there, to gently speak to that person, because remember, it's ambiguous, and just point out to them why you thought what they did was uncivil. Now, if it's going to result in some type of violence, maybe you want to have a disinterested third party present. But at no time, ladies and gentlemen, if you feel like somebody has treated you uncivilly, should you allow it to slide. Why? Because it's on a line of continuum. It may be low intensity today, but it's out of control 6 weeks from now. So you need to check it immediately. So the answer to your question is, if you feel comfortable, just point it out to the person. They might not perceive it the way you did. Personality, as we're going to learn later, matters. Your personality should matter as well. What are you willing to put up with? If you thought it was uncivil, see something, say something. Sabrina, do we have any other questions before I continue?
Yes, we do, Pete. The next question is, this is a male participant on the webinar. I recently had to file a report with the security office for an incident with another man because I feel he's going to retaliate against me. The same guy came by my desk today and and the language is a condescending manner that he left. I just found out that this person is in a position of power. Should I escalate this to EEO?
Good question. At no time will I tell anyone not to elevate something to EEO. I'm not a lawyer, nor do I play one on TV. So anytime you feel something may be an issue of discrimination, you have an absolute unmitigated right to go to EEO. However, based on the way you describe your situation, I'm not quite sure we're ready for EEO yet. It sounds more like a law enforcement issue. I heard the words threats, and it sounded like it was on more than one occasion. If that is the case, if I were you, step one is I'm letting my supervisor know I feel unsafe in this workplace. And if it is my supervisor making me feel unsafe, I'm telling his or her supervisor, because nobody should feel physically unsafe at work. You didn't sign up for that. So can you go to EEO? Absolutely. But I'm simply suggesting, based on how you described your situation, it sounded like a law enforcement problem.
Thank you.
Sabrina, do we have any other questions?
Yes. The next question. Many organizations have leaders who by instinct or practice protect other leaders. This is a challenge in terms of expecting leadership to step in. What practical suggestions can you offer taking that into consideration?
Fair enough. And an excellent question to boot. Ladies and gentlemen, first let's acknowledge something. What that person just said is absolutely true. There are leaders in this world who are not caring for their people. Sadly, that is a true statement. So the question was, what can I do or what can we do? One of the things you can do is cajole that person into doing the right thing by suggesting, hey, boss, whoever you may be, we would really like to have some incivility training in our group because we may be acting uncivilly toward each other. No need to point the finger at the boss, right? What we're going to hope is, ladies and gentlemen, is by participating in said training, something will catch on. When we hear certain things as leaders, sometimes a light bulb comes on. But here's what we know isn't going to work. If you don't take my advice and invite your boss to start doing civility training, the status quo will remain. And you're going to become a victim of health issues because, as I pointed out about 18 slides ago, incivility is directly related to stress at work. So I don't have an easy answer, nor am I going to make one up for you. What I can do, however, is offer a suggestion. I and my staff are more than willing to come to wherever you are to make sure that you and your boss are getting the proper training so we are all on the same incivility sheet of music. Sabrina, do we
Yes.
have any other questions from the audience?
Yes, I'm going to take this next question and then we will continue. What protection or recourse does an employee have if the chain of leadership up to the department level does nothing and covers for each lower level of instigators?
Ladies and gentlemen, we can't have it both ways. If we realize that the chain of command in and of itself is acting dysfunctionally and in some cases unethically, the No Fear Act says that we should not live in fear of retaliation, that as federal servants, we have to blow the whistle. These individuals are abusing their positions. Nobody is above the law. Even the president can be impeached. So if the president's job isn't safe, nobody's job is safe. But if you allow them to get away with it because you say, oh, well, they're too high up the food chain, then you are a part of the problem and not the solution. Here's what I mean by that. Are you risking your own career by blowing the whistle? Absolutely. Are you risking your own career by doing nothing? Absolutely. Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you can't, either way you're going to be right. Likewise here, my friends. Whether you blow the whistle or not, your career is in shambles based on how you describe this problem. But if there is a slight chance that by blowing the whistle, I and my colleagues may receive some relief, maybe I have a moral obligation to start looking for that whistle to blow. Sabrina, this time, because we have quite a few slides to go, I want to keep this thing moving.
Yes.
But ladies and gentlemen, please know that we will take questions at the end of this session. So if you want to stick around, I will be more than happy to engage you. Civility is more than being politically correct. Politically correct is a term used for whiny, overly sensitive pansies who need everything sugar-coated for them, so they say. But here's the things, my friends. Privilege is when you think something is not a problem because it's not a problem to you personally. Right now, to my knowledge, I have no disabilities. So technically, I could care less whether or not we have wheelchair accessible doors on my building. And if I hear somebody with a disability crying about the fact that we don't have it, technically, I could fall over into this so-called whiny, overly sensitive pansy category. What I will remind each of you of is this, my friends. Whatever the category is that is saying, what about us? Just remember, your category could be next on the list of what about us. So all of us should want to be politically correct, because being politically incorrect is not good for anyone. That means, as the rap group used to say back in the 80s, you can be nasty as you want to be. And I can assure you, that's not going to help any of us. Let's be civil. So what does incivility look like at work? Let me give you a little story. So there you are, either in traffic on the way to work or in traffic on the way from work. You finally fight through all of that uncivil behavior on the highway just in time to make it home to your spouse who's upset with you. Now, after putting up with everything at work and traffic, this is what you come home to. You and your spouse finally said, fine, and you go to separate rooms, and your teenager shows up with a bad attitude, further compounding your day. You decide to go out for a walk, and while out for a walk, you check the family mailbox, only to discover a foreclosure notice. Your spouse has been gambling away the mortgage money. Fine. You get back in your car, and on your way to work, you decide to stop by your doctor to get the results of that routine test. Now you find out you got 1 year to live. You get in your car to head back to work, turn on the radio, only to find out your favorite pop star died unexpectedly. You finally make it to your desk. You got a short deadline. You are overwhelmed, so you pull out your desk drawer and you pop that antidepressant that nobody knows you're on. Because after all, HIPAA Act says they don't have to know. In comes the instigators, yelling and screaming as they usually do. On most days, male targets, you could handle it. But this day, it was the straw that broke the camel's back. You went outside to get your Second Amendment remedies. Ladies and gentlemen, I tell you, nobody ever just snaps. So when you see that police line, do not cross, say to yourself, I wonder did they go to incivility training? And if they did they really listen to Pete? Here are some examples of incivility. Rudeness, treating a subordinate like a child. We don't do that at the Weather Service. That's what they do at NOAA, I'm told. Berating a subordinate or coworker, making unfounded accusations. Have any of you experienced this? And if not, have any of you been guilty of that? Excluding coworkers or team members. These are acts of incivility. Interrupting people. Here at the mighty fine Office of Equal Opportunity and Diversity Management, my team has told me that I am rude. We now have a bell installed, and they will ring the bell for me whenever they perceive that I have been acting uncivilly. The bell rings so much around here, I've purchased myself a pair of earmuffs. but at least I'm aware. Use of demeaning language. Even educational levels can be used to determine worth. Mocking your coworkers. All of these, ladies and gentlemen, are examples, not all inclusive and certainly not exhaustive, but they are examples of incivility. What are the possible causes of this uncivil behavior? Stress and anger due to increased workloads. We don't have that problem at the NWS, do we? Increased workloads? There's no stress here, right? Questionable job security. I've not heard them talking about closing down any WFOs, have you? Organizational change. IDSS come to mind maybe? Resulting in more responsibility and fewer resources. Even a casual work day can add to incivility. Why is that? When people dress less formally or casually, they tend to act that way. They lose respect for whoever they're talking to. That's why you get more uncivil behavior on dress down Friday than you do on Monday. Now we're getting somewhere, ladies and gentlemen. My favorite part of this presentation. You may know me, but you have no idea who I am. In other words, what they're saying here, ladies and gentlemen, you know who I want you to know. Because see, the Pete Hill at work is not the same Pete Hill at play. At work, I do what I have to do to survive. But you have no idea who I am when I'm not at work. Nor do I have any idea who you are, which makes no sense for anybody to want to be an instigator. Do you really know the people you work with? What they are capable of? What they have done already before they came to the weather service? Why would you be acting uncivil when you don't know that person that well? You don't have to be a psychiatrist to work here, but it helps. Here's why, ladies and gentlemen. We got the internal dimensions and the external dimensions of any organization. Let's look at our external dimensions first. We got management status, union affiliations, work location, seniority, our division and department groups. That's a big deal. Have you ever been in a place where just because somebody works at headquarters, they may be a GS7, but just because they work at headquarters, they think they can talk to you any kind of way? Work content and the field that you're in. All of these things are pressure points, ladies and gentlemen. As we get closer to the word personality, look at those other potential stressors. Remember the story I told? When you was going to work, getting home, coming to work, etc.? Potential instigators within the sound of my voice, please know. Most people have all of these things going on. It's not just you that's stressing them out. You may be the one feather. These other things, that's the 10,000 feathers that broke their back. You just happened to be the last one when they pulled the pistol out. Ladies and gentlemen, because we don't really know our colleagues, I beseech you, I implore you, refrain from acting uncivil in the workplace. Personality matters, I promise you. What is personality? Here's the key. You see, personality refers to the relatively enduring characteristics that differentiate one person from another. But see, here's the key in there, ladies and gentlemen, 2 words. Consistent and predictable manner. Consistent and predictable. Consistent and predictable. If I were you, potential instigators, there are certain personalities in the workplace you do not want to be acting uncivil with. Consistent and predictable. What's going to happen to you is that person will become inconsistent and unpredictable. Now you have a problem. But what makes us able to cooperate in the workplace, ladies and gentlemen, is that we have this unwritten agreement that we are all going to act consistent and predictable. so that our colleagues over extended periods of time can count on us. But if you are treating me uncivilly, you're going to push me off of my rocker, and I'm now going to start acting inconsistent. And when you thought you knew me, I now become unpredictable. And then good luck with that one. Personality, my friends, therefore is defined as the enduring or lasting patterns of behavior as well as thought across time and any situation. That is important. Situation. Not everybody, based on their personality, handles situations the same. Last summer, I had an opportunity to come across this article entitled Investigating Individual Differences Among Targets of Workplace Incivility. Clearly, I don't have a life. But according to Milam, Spitz, Mueller, and Penny, these three researchers, here's what they discovered when they was investigating workplace incivility, ladies and gentlemen. They discovered that workers, your colleagues, they have a public face and a private face. Of course, the public is what they show us. The private is what they keep hidden from us. Remember in my example, that person was taking antidepressants? You had no clue until the bullets started flying. Personality matters, ladies and gentlemen. Not to mention, do they matter? There's 5 in particular that matter. We're going to call them the big 5. This is a 5-factor model of personality. It is a hierarchical organization of personality traits in terms of extroversion, agreeableness, consciousness, neuroticism, openness, and experience. These were the things, personalities if you will, that Milam, Spitz, Mueller, and Penny looked at to determine what personality type was more or less likely to fall victim or to become a target of incivility. Let's take a look. First of all, we need to know what these things are. How are they defined? They defined openness, as you can see, as creative and imaginative and intelligent, curious, adventurous. I'm not going to read all of these for you. I would ask that you take a moment and look at it so I can talk about it. So while you're reading it, I'm going to say a few things. All of these things together, ladies and gentlemen, come up with something they call your social well-being. This is our connectiveness to society and beliefs that one can contribute to society's growth. Our social well-being, therefore, is a good predictor of mental and physical health. Oh boy, didn't we say earlier that uncivil behavior negatively impacts a person's health? So our social well-being is in jeopardy when we don't feel well at work. And one of the reasons why we're not going to feel well at work is because the instigator has targeted you or me. Let's find out how each personality is going to handle this. By the way, they only looked at 3 of these personalities. They looked at the extrovert, agreeable, and neuroticism. They didn't worry about openness because that was about creativity, and they didn't worry about consciousness because basically that is you and your connection to your environment. When they looked at the personality traits of a person who has a high degree, remember they're looking at you, ladies and gentlemen, in terms of were you high in agreeableness or low? You want to be high in agreeableness. I say again, you want to be high. Why do you want to be high? Because high in agreeableness means you're quick to forgive, you're good-natured, you're cooperative, you're trusting, and you're sympathetic. But here's the thing. If you're high in agreeableness, it makes you less likely to be a target, but at the same time, it makes you more likely to be an instigator. If you were paying attention to me, I mentioned that it is low intensity, ambiguous behavior. Remember how I talked about they could wrap what they were doing into laughter. Look at this person's traits. Good-natured. People trust them. They're sympathetic. In other words, they may have only picked you out. Everybody else loves this guy or gal. He or she just picked you out to treat uncivilly, and they are able to masquerade like they're a Mr. or Mrs. Good Guy, and you think that they're the most horrible person in the world. People who have high degrees of agreeableness have low uncooperative traits. They are least likely to be stubborn, highly unlikely to be rude, which is why they can get away with messing with you. Because when somebody asks about that person, they're going to describe them in glowing terms. High degrees of agreeableness means you are fun to work with and a pleasure to supervise. And that is how you get away with being an instigator. Remember when I said management will protect you? Because management just cannot imagine you doing those things. You're such a great person. Here were the findings of the study. Low agreeableness played a major role. Remember, that is low agreeableness. If you are uncooperative, if you do act stubborn or rude, then you are also more likely to be an instigator. So it could go either way with this person. But here's what their study said. Low agreeableness plays a major role in who will become a target of incivility in the workplace. Individuals rated low in agreeableness will experience more incivility. This is what low looks like. They just said, if you have low incivility or low in agreeableness, your co-workers are going to treat you horrible. Why do you think that is? Because you are a jerk. You are acting uncooperative. You are stubborn, rude. Nobody likes you. They are going to mistreat you. Individuals rated low in agreeableness will experience more incivility than those who have high agreeableness. Employees rated low on the agreeableness scales by their peers, get this, were more likely to be the target, not of your manager, of your coworkers. They hate you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have a low score in agreeableness, that is grounds for people to treat you badly. It is called retaliation because you were acting rude. Remember that tit for tat thing I told you about? You started something. Now everybody wants to one-up you. Let's check out another personality. Neuroticism. Here's where we're getting somewhere. If you are high in neuroticism, you're not going to be fun to work with either. You're that person who's overly sensitive. You have trouble handling small conflicts. You interpret ambiguous events as negative. You are normally angry, sad, nervous. We don't know what you are from minute to minute. You are difficult to work with. Everything is a problem. You're always complaining. We hope that you take leave. We are glad when you have AWS Day. We want to donate leave to you. People who are high in neuroticism, ladies and gentlemen, that is not a good thing. If you are low in neuroticism, that is an excellent thing. So it's the opposite of the other one. We want you to be low as a neurotic. Because if you're high, you are hell to work with. So the study said, confrontational behaviors of the neurotic is seen by their coworkers as grounds for retaliation, ladies and gentlemen. If you act like a neurotic in the workplace, your coworkers are going to retaliate against you. They're not going to like you very much. Also, when we look at the high, see where it says interprets ambiguous events as negative? What was the definition of incivility, for God's sake? Let's see. Deviant behavior with ambiguous intent. So think about that, because I will ask the question. Does that mean that a neurotic is more likely to think everything is uncivil if they interpret ambiguous events as negative? There's nothing really to talk about with the extrovert because there was no negative relation between extroversion and workplace incivility. You're the person everybody wants to be around. Extroverts tend to be better at networking and socializing in the workplace. Extroverts experience positive events more frequently, and they interpret neutral events in a positive light. Now, here's where this could be a problem for the extrovert. Everybody knows the boss hates that extrovert, and the boss keeps doing uncivil things to the extrovert. But because the extrovert always sees the glass as half full, they will make excuses for the instigator. Oh, they didn't really mean it that way. You're misinterpreting what they were doing. Sir, they moved the chair out when you were about to sit down. They were trying to hurt you. But the extrovert says, no, they just needed a chair. Extroverts tend to find satisfaction with social interactions. It is in their best interest to make these interactions rewarding to the other party as well. So not only do they want to be happy, they want you to be happy. So even though the instigator is trying to act uncivil, unlike the neurotic, this person, the extrovert, they could care less. They are not going to take the bait. At this time, Sabrina, do we have any questions? I got 3 minutes for questions. I got to keep it moving. Are there any questions at this time?
Yes, Pete, we do have questions.
We have 3 minutes for those questions, Sabrina, so let's take care of them.
Okay. Who do you contact in cases of assault and it is known about all the way to the department level and nothing was done or will be done?
So you have two options. In some government buildings, you have federal police, or they call them the FPS, the Federal Protective Services. If you see no Federal Protective Services, every county has a sheriff. Every city has a police force. By all means, you should reach out to law enforcement. Are there any other questions, Sabrina?
Yes. The next question, how do you approach an instigator that is also the union steward for your office, an individual who holds their position over management and stifles any progress in the office, and a union that will not take your concerns into consideration because you are not a union member?
Good question. Again, ladies and gentlemen, I realize that some of my answers are not going to sit very well with you, but they will be true nevertheless. At the end of the day, based on the way that problem was described, that means the person, the victim, the target in this case, is going to have to step this up a bit. If internally there's no one I can turn to for one reason or another, the union doesn't seem to care because I'm not in the union, and the union appears to have something over management. Now, I don't know whether that is an assumption on your part or not, but first we got to get rid of that, the assumption. How do we do it? Excuse me, supervisor person, here's my situation with my union steward. You have to put management in a position to either help or hurt you, friend or foe. Once you make that determination, now the next steps are going to be the following. Are they doing this to me because of my race, my sex, my gender? In other words, you're looking for an EEO legal cover because there is no legal cover for bullying or incivility. First, you got to find out whose side management is on. We can't make any assumptions, force them to be on one side or the other. Here's my situation. Here's how I perceive this. I'm a non-union member, blah, 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 blah. And if they throw you under the bus, now you know whose side management is on. You dust yourself off. Now we got to follow a different course of action. But right now, because I'm assuming you haven't brought this to their attention, based on your perception, they are afraid of the union person. But have you confirmed that yet? And again, I don't know if you have or not. But if you have, then you're going to need to look at other courses of actions. Are they doing this to me because of discrimination? or they're just being, excuse my French, a butthole. If being a butthole was illegal, my brother-in-law would be in handcuffs and leg irons. Sabrina, I got time for one more question. I must keep it moving.
Okay. What do you do when whistleblowing does not work? Even when assault is reported, they say that's not their area of concern. Who do you contact next? The media?
No. Well, I mean, you can always contact the media. Let me not say no. You're an American citizen, so in that light, you are free to contact the media. But if you're really trying to resolve your problem, the United States Special Counsel is who you should be contacting if you're still trying to maintain your civilian job. You want to give the government its full opportunity to assist you. So until you've exhausted all avenues, you should keep it moving within the government system. The United States Special Counsel, that is what they are there for. With that being said, Sabrina, I'm going to keep it moving, and we will
Okay.
stop later on.
Okay.
Low intensity, deviant behavior with an ambiguous intent to harm. The definition of incivility, incivilis, not of a citizen. What does it look like? Acting rude to co-workers or contract employees. Acting rude to co-workers or staff because your educational achievements are superior. You are preventing staff members from excelling because of professional jealousy. You fail to return people's phone calls, voicemails, or emails just because you can. You got a tendency to be yelling, pounding your fist, slamming phones down, perhaps spitting as you're speaking to people, throwing objects, addressing people in an unprofessional manner. Hey, sweetheart, get over here. Ignoring others and their opinions. Yeah, whatever. Next, telling or emailing jokes about race, sex, sexual orientation, etc. Now you have gone down the line of continuum to discrimination. Low intensity, deviant behavior with an ambiguous intent to harm. Tell me why I should care, Pete Hill. I'm not in any of these groups up here. I'm not homosexual. I'm not even a woman. I'm not Islamic. I don't have an issue with age. I have no disability. And I'm good to go in every other category. Tell me why I should care. As I said before, ladies and gentlemen, it'll start off as something simple as rude comments, and it will end up as something like a violent outburst that could involve handguns or rifles. That is why you should care. Anytime I get a chance to quote General George S. Patton, I do not allow it to escape me. General Patton said, and I concur, we herd sheep, we drive cattle, but we lead people. So out there, within the sound of my voice, lead me, follow me, or get out of my way. That is what your people are thinking if you are a manager or a supervisor listening to me right now. These are some of the books that I've read over the years. And this is a saying that they taught me in the United States Army the 22 years I served. Leadership is influencing people by providing three things, Sergeant, they told me: purpose, direction, and motivation. You do this while operating to accomplish the mission and improving the organization. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if that was good enough for the Army, a place where violence was not only mandatory, it was highly encouraged, but even they thought that we should provide some purpose, direction, and motivation. What have you been reading lately, managers and supervisors? Because if you're on this phone call, surely you've heard the questions. These people want to know, does my leader have emotional intelligence? Let me recommend Daniel Goleman to you. They want to know, am I working for a principle-centered leader? Let me recommend Stephen R. Covey, the same guy who wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And my all-time favorite, Mr. John C. Maxwell, The 5 Levels of Leadership. I'm currently reading A World Waiting to be Born, Civility Rediscovered, Managers, Leaders, Supervisors. I highly recommend, if you've not read these books, that you start doing so today. Why? Because it matters what leaders do or don't do. You see, my friends, the culture of any organization will be shaped by, get this, the worst behavior that a leader is willing to tolerate. The burden of command. The culture of any organization is shaped by the worst behavior the leader is willing to tolerate. And that brings us to something I've been talking about all day, either directly or covertly, and that is power. See, my friends, in 1959, social psychologist John French and his good friend Bertram Raven identified 5 types of leadership power. And if you are a leader or a supervisor within the sound of my voice, and you are either unaware of the 5 types or you are aware of them and not utilizing them, then you, my friends, are tolerating the worst behavior. What are those 5 powers? We have legitimate power. Legitimate power is there because you are the boss. The law says you are in charge. Reverent power. Your people revere you. They worship you. You are the epitome of greatness. They will do whatever you do. Expert power. That is usually how we get promoted. Subject matter expertise. Coercive power. Purpose, direction, and motivation. Coercive is a negative motivation. You either do what I tell you to do or else. Don't act incivilly or uncivilly in my workspace. Reward power. For those of you doing the right thing, I'm going to take care of you. Those of you doing the wrong thing, I'm going to coerce you. Those are the 5 types of power that we're about to talk about. As I said before, legitimate power. This is the power that emanates from an official position held by someone, be it in an organization or the government. Now, here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. This legitimate power, you don't want to abuse it because it's short in duration. The moment you leave that position, the power will leave you. So what you don't want to be, managers, supervisors, and leaders, is a level 1 positional leader. Because if you got your legitimate power from your title, I'm the boss, you are in trouble. Because people will only follow you because they have to. You don't want to be in that position. Reverent power. When you have reverent power, that refers to the ability of a leader to influence. How do we provide influence? Through purpose, direction, and motivation. People are now following you out of loyalty, respect, and admiration. How can incivility thrive in that type of environment when those very people are looking at you, trying to get your approval? So for all of you non-managers, leaders, and supervisors who have been asking me, so if there's no legal protection, how am I going to be protected? Referent power. If you have that kind of supervisor, you should never be in jeopardy of being mistreated because you have this loyalty, respect, and admiration for your leader. They're going to have the same for you. Therefore, the uncivil person cannot exist. Remember what it said. You will get the worst behavior you're willing to tolerate. Expert power, managers, leaders, and supervisors. This is a personal kind of power which owes its genesis to the skills and the expertise that you possess as a person, which is of a higher quality and it's not easily available. Not everybody can be Steve Jobs. In such a situation, the leader can exercise the power of knowledge to influence people because knowledge bestows credibility and respect. What if you use that expert power, leaders, managers, supervisors, to learn all you could about workplace incivility, bullying, and discrimination. How much better would that environment be? Because if you are a reverent leader, you have the loyalty and respect and admiration of your followers. How can incivility thrive? Coercive power, my friends, this is the kind of power that involves the use of threats to get people to do the right thing. You see, you can't talk nice to everybody. I mentioned personality to you earlier, and it was acting a particular way over a period of time. Consistency. If you're a consistency acting outside of the norm, we're going to need to rein you in. In the organizational setup, coercive power translates into threatening someone with transfers, firing, or demotions. If you are an instigator, what? No. Ladies and gentlemen, if you can hear me, please type yes in the box. Sabrina, please let me know if everyone can still hear me. Sabrina, if you can hear me, let me know, please. Sabrina, if you can
Yes,
hear me, could you
yes,
let me know?
I can hear you. Yes, I was responding back to someone. I can hear you. People can hear you.
Okay, because I was told that I was not being heard, so
Yeah,
I just wanted to make sure that.
I got a message from a few people that their audio went out, so it must have been something on their end because we can hear you and other people can hear you as well.
Okay, well, that's good to know, ladies and gentlemen. I was on a roll there, so I was hoping everyone heard that. Coercive power is where we were. It basically forces people to submit to one's demand for the fear of losing something. The only person who should ever be in fear in a workspace is that person who chooses to act uncivilly. They should fear being transferred, fired, or demoted if necessary based on their rude and discourteous behavior to their colleagues. But for the rest of you, you should be living in peace and tranquility. Reward power. As the name suggests, this is a type of power where we use rewards, perks, even new projects or training opportunities and better roles and monetary benefits to influence you, ladies and gentlemen, to do the right thing. However, an interesting aspect of this type of power is that, sadly, it's not powerful enough in and of itself, as decisions relate to rewards do not rest solely with the person promising them. What they're saying here is, don't promise something you can't deliver. Don't tell people they're going to get a cash bonus when you are not the finance officer. You see, other people come into play like senior managers, even various boards, to determine who will and won't get rewards. So don't overpromise and underdeliver. Organizational culture. Here's what we got when we talk about organizational culture. It is amplified by the behaviors of the leaders. Organizational culture is visible in the way that work gets done on a day-to-day basis. Organizational culture is evident in the behavior of individuals as well as groups. Organizational behavior, ladies and gentlemen, is a shared belief, value, or assumptions that are held by every member of that organization. Do we all believe that we work in a civilized organization? Do we share that belief that if we complain, we won't be retaliated against? Can I confirm that my supervisor values treating me righteously on a daily basis? because that's part of organizational culture, which is embedded in a network of organizational practices. There's a cost, ladies and gentlemen, to incivility. And let's talk about it. These are the costs. 48% were intentionally managers and supervisors. Almost half of your people that are treated poorly, they will intentionally decrease their work effort. I'm referring to the targets of incivility. Half of them pretty much will decrease their work effort because you, managers, leaders, supervisor, did not assist them. 47% will intentionally decrease the time that they even come to work. Riding leave, sick leave. 38% will intentionally decrease the quality of the work. Yeah, I came to work, but I ain't gonna do much while I'm here. 80% lost work time worrying about the incident, sitting at their desk with their hands in their heads because of you, coworker, mistreating them. 63% lost work time avoiding the offender, leaving their cubicle every 10 minutes because they're afraid you may come by. 66% said that their performance declined thanks to you, Mr. or Mrs. Instigator. 78% said that their commitment to the organization also declined. 12% said that they left their job. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a documented fact. People don't leave organizations, they leave leaders. 25% said that they admitted to taking their frustration out on customers. Who are our customers? If you look at your performance appraisal, critical element number 1, I think it says something about customer service. The answer to that question is, we are each other's customers. So why would I want to treat you uncivilly? Think about that. I put out a lot of information, ladies and gentlemen, and I know I probably caused some of you to get a headache. But let me tell you how we get from here to there. Here's what we can't do. After all I've said today, and for some it was frustrating, what we can't do is put our heads in the sand. Because there are many solutions to incivility, people, but that ain't one of them. But there are 10 things I can leave you with today, and I will do so. 10 things that all of us can do, not to create perfect harmony, but to get as close as we can. If we do, collectively, these 10 things, we will minimize or mitigate the impact or effects or effects of incivility. Examine your own behavior and how you contribute to the civility or worse, incivility in your workspace. Take a temperature. Check in your unit to see how staff treat one another, managers, leaders, supervisors. The 11 principles of leadership. Know your team and look out for their well-being. If you're taking the temperature, that means you're getting to know your staff. You're finding out who's uncivil to other people or not. Don't listen to or tolerate rumors and gossip. Coworkers, don't be spreading rumors. When you hear it, stop it. Encourage staff not to jump to conclusions about the intent or motives of coworkers. If we know our staff and look out for their well-being, coworkers, that it goes for you as well, we know who is a neurotic and who is not. If you listen to Pete Hill today, you know that people with a neurotic personality, they see a boogeyman behind every shadow. Don't let them jump to conclusions. Stop the blame game and encourage a solution-oriented, ladies and gentlemen, stop the blame game and encourage a solution orientation to problems. Let's quit focusing on what's wrong and let's find out what we can do to make it right. Encourage acts of kindness among the staff. Be you the leader or the coworker. Treat each other right. Go out of your way to say thank you and promote this behavior in the staff, managers, leaders, and supervisors. Look for common ground in dealing with conflict. Encourage the practice of forgiveness. And last but not least, make it safe for the staff. to ask questions and discuss problems. Ladies and gentlemen, your training is now complete. What are your questions, comments, or concerns for me?
Okay, thank you, Pete. The next question on the floor is, what should you do if you reach the point where you feel like you're going to snap due to incivility at work?
First thing you want to do is talk to somebody. I can't tell you who the somebody is, but it should be somebody whose opinion you respect and trust. So it may be a spouse, a coworker, or a manager from another department. But what you don't want to do is to internalize the hurt. Remember what I said about the seemingly ambiguous intents can build up over time. Find somebody to talk to. Once you talk it out, it may not be as bad as you think, or it could be worse than you assumed. But you got to talk it out.
Right.
Any other questions, Sabrina?
We don't have any other questions. Please post your questions in the chat box. Pete is still available to answer any of your questions or comments.
We will be available for the next 5 or so minutes, depending on how many questions we get. We will stay as long as necessary. Please do not be bashful. We are here for you.
Okay, we are not seeing any additional questions. We did have some feedback to just say that this was a great presentation. Everyone learned a lot. The presentation was excellent for training, and there are some who are interested in having this presentation provided for their office. So if that is the case for anyone out there, please contact Pete directly, and he will provide additional information for making that happen.
Sabrina, if I may, I will point out that Mary Dunbar, mary.dunbar@noaa.gov. If you have a training request, please reach out to mary.dunbar@noaa.gov.
Okay. Thank you. And also, the slides will be made available for you. We will make sure that everyone who was registered today will receive a copy of the slides.
Ladies and gentlemen, it was my pleasure to share a moment or two with you today. Again, this is what we are here for. So if you have any questions about equal opportunity or diversity management, never hesitate to reach out to us. We are here for you. All right, until next time, we'll talk to everybody later.
Thank you.